Hey everybody, welcome back to Gideon Stuff, and today I've actually got a little bit of a different video. This is a response video to one of my favorite YouTubers here on the platform, actually, Scab from CCO, Choir Boys Cutlery Outdoors. He released a video recently. You guys aren't going to be seeing this for a while, but I thought it was worth commenting on because it touches on some topics that I discussed already in my video about clones, copies, and counterfeits. You guys should definitely check that video out. And I had just finished making that video when he uploaded this video, and I decided that I want to pitch in my 2 cents because I disagree with Scab's take.
And this is a video to bring up discussion, right? You don't have to agree with what I'm saying. I don't know how you can't.
Well, I'll tell you how. Now, right off the bat, really weird that I have to say this in today's day and age, but I'm going to say it. Just because I disagree with Scab does not mean that I don't like him. His channel is one of the best on the platform, okay? His channel is one of the best on the platform. I just disagree with this one take of his, all right? So, not trying to stir up any drama, beef, or anything. I'm sure he gets that. I appreciate it if everyone else watching this video got that as well. But I do disagree with him. And here's what I disagree with him on and why. We're going to try and make this quick. I know quick videos is not what I normally do on the channel here, but I'm sitting in my truck right now. I just got done filming some other videos. Look at this view real quick. I say we're going to be fast and then I do a complete tangent to look outside, but it's worth it. It's going to be dark soon, but I like coming out here, hanging out by the river, and watching the sunset. Okay, so the video that we're responding to is titled The Myth of the Stolen Designs. And in the video, Scab's thesis is essentially that everything has already been done.
Here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the myth of knife designing. Every blade shape that has ever been made or will ever be made, every blade shape has been made. Just has.
Every possible knife has already been designed, has already been made. There is really no such thing as an original knife design. And I have major umbrage with that. I do not think that everything has already been made, and I think that thinking, or I think that that mindset can actually be, I don't know if harmful is the right word, but I think there's a better way to look at this, a more hopeful way. But I want to start with the very first point that Scab brought up, which was every blade shape has already been made. And to that, I would say, and this is going to be something that we talk about a lot more in this video, archetypes exist, but look at how much discourse there is online of people arguing over blade shape terminology, classification. There are so many arguments. Every time a new knife is released, there are so many arguments about, oh, is this sheep's foot? Is this a Warncliffe? Oh, is that a reverse Tonto or a straight clip point, a spay blade? There's all kinds of arguments. And to me, what this shows is that even though archetypes exist, even though there are patterns that exist and there are groups that we can sort things into, enough variation still exists that we can have arguments over the pedantic details.
Every handle shape, every handle style has been done. It's been done.
The next thing that Scab brings up is handles. He says the same thing. Every single handle has already been done. And this is where I think it's important for us to start talking about, I guess, archetypes or functional forms. I didn't mention it earlier, but another important part of Scab's thesis is that there have been 107 billion people that have ever existed throughout human history. And it's very possible that multiple people have had the same idea. And yeah, that's happened for sure. Absolutely.
In 2022, there was a worldwide world history kind of census taken. And in that census, it said there was about 117 billion people who've ever lived on the face of this earth. Out of 117 billion people, you don't think 2 people can't have the same thought? You don't think 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, 20 people, throughout time immemorial, from then till now, can't have the same thought?
Now, why are some ideas similar? I'm going to bring out this knife right here. This is my White River Ursus Cub. This is the knifiest knife that has ever knifed, right? This is a pretty standard knife. It's got a drop point blade, nothing crazy going on here. Have there been a lot of knives that have looked like this through history? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If I just saw a silhouette of this knife, would I be able to call it out as an Ursus Cub? Maybe, actually. The position of the lanyard hole, but it would be rather difficult. Why have so many knives looked like this over time? Well, because this is a shape that works, and especially in regard to the handle conversation. Most humans have hands that are very, very similar, right? We've got variations. I talk about my hands here on the channel often. I say I've got regular man-sized palms and then short, skinny girl fingers. I do. Your hands may vary. But by and large, we have the same structure. We've got 5 digits. Our thumb sits down here. We've got a nice, big, fleshy palm. What feels good in my hand probably feels good in your hand. Probably felt good in your grandpa's hand and his grandpa's hand, and so on and so forth. So there are certain design elements, there are certain features that have come about throughout history because they just work. They just work, and they've become archetypes. There are many, many drop point blades out there. Many knives with drop point blades. And they are all going to share similarities because they are coming from the same archetype, the drop point blade archetype. But that doesn't mean that every drop point blade looks exactly the same. These are just 2 random knives that I had. This is a drop point, this is a drop point. Clearly different blade shapes. They have similarities, right? There's definitely family lines here. There's family resemblance, but they are still distinct. Call them archetypes, call them patterns even, if you want to. There are certain, what the frick is on my ear? A little bit of mud. Like I said, I was making other videos today. Certain archetypes and patterns exist, but it is possible to have endless variations on those patterns.
Here's my thing, and John brought this up on a comment yesterday on one of my videos. What makes a knife design someone's? That's a great question. I talked to William Collins about that this weekend, and he's like, Scab, knife design comes down pretty much to handle materials, steel that you want to use for the knife, colors, that's it.
So here, Scab cites a maker who said that knife design comes down to basically materials and colors, which, again, I very much disagree with. Even if your knife looks similar to another knife out there, it doesn't mean that it's exactly identical. Again, there's a lot of knives that look like this out there. There are. And we'll talk about like copying here in a second. But that is not all that knife design comes down to. It is not just materials and colors. I would actually point you guys to the website of another knife maker who has recently come back to YouTube. So I've been watching recently, who I have some disagreements with some of his views on a lot of things, but I think he is definitely someone who walks the walk and talks the talk, and that is J. Fisher Knives. Go look at his website. Go look through his catalog of custom knife designs. He has hundreds of knife designs, and some of them look similar to other knives. Like he makes kitchen knives, for example, And there are a lot of kitchen knife patterns that are, very easily recognizable, right? There are patterns that have existed in kitchen cutlery for many, many years that people keep building on. But even in those parameters, he finds a way to distinguish his work and make it look a little bit different. Now, the reason I bring him up in particular is not just because he has a massive catalog of custom knife designs, but it's also because he is someone that really specializes in variety of material choices. He works with a bunch of really, really awesome materials. He does a lot of work with gemstones, which as a geologist, I find really, really cool. By the way, he also is from Clovis, New Mexico. I used to live over there on that side of the state. Oh man, this is my favorite time of night. The mountains are turning blue and pink. But he uses so many different types of materials. He uses G10, but he also he doesn't really use a lot of wood, but he uses all kinds of different gemstones. We're talking different cuts of agates. We're talking different types. I don't even, like what was it? He showed a knife recently that was, I can't remember what it's called, but, man, I feel like an idiot right now. Anyways, he uses a wide plethora of different handle materials. But even then, he is not only relying on his handle materials to differentiate his knives, which he very well could. A lot of stuff that he's working with are one-offs, right? When you cut an agate, when you cut a piece of jasper, when you cut some banded iron formation, whatever, that you're going to be using in your knife handle, because that's a natural material, that cut is one of a kind. That cut is the only one in the world that's going to look like that. He could just rely on that to differentiate all of his knife models, but he doesn't. He has hundreds of designs. He has designs that are for counterterrorism, tactical type knives, and within that category of his catalog, he has some designs that share similar features: tanto blades, serrations, finger loops, things like that. There are overlaps, but all of his designs are separate designs. You can tell them apart. He's got his kitchen cutlery, same thing. He's got his EDC fixed blades. He does make folders, but he mostly specializes with fixed blades. He's got his, I guess, more utility style fixed blades. And there are overlaps between all these different categories, all these different genres, but he still has knives that look very notably distinguishable from each other. Okay? Once again, just to reiterate, this is a man who could differentiate his entire catalog based solely on his handle materials. But he doesn't. He designs each and every knife. And he has a lot to say on knife design, actually. Again, I would recommend reading up on his website. Again, sometimes I find his tone to be a little bit interesting, but he's a man that walks the walk and talks the talk, and I'm not going to tell him how to do his art. He has a lot to say about design. He has a lot to say about how he does not design knives for other people to get made by anyone else. He does not take people's knife designs and make them for that person. He does his own knife designs because to him that's important. That is his signature. Again, I'll link his stuff down below in the description.
I saw not too long ago, Lon Humphreys got upset at Jeremy Boulder Valentine saying that he copied one of his knives. That's one example that I've seen here recently. Now, here's the deal. Lon did do a knife very, very similar to this. I've known Jeremy on here for about 5 years. I've used all his designs, and honest to God, I don't think Jeremy copied it. I think they had the same thought.
All right, so let's talk about makers claiming foul play, claiming, oh, you stole my design. I do agree, especially when it comes to fixed blades, that can be a very hard thing to prove. This is a very generic knife. It is very, very likely that someone else who has never heard of the White River Ursus Cub has thought up a design very, very similar to this, almost exactly like it, right? And so calling foul play is dubious. It could be dubious. However, the next point that I want to make in this video is that there are still ways to differentiate even the most basic of knives, and there are ways to tell when someone is being lazy. There is a difference between two people having a very similar idea and someone directly copying someone else's homework. Actually, a great example of this whole two designers having very similar thoughts would be recently Ben Peterson of NAFs had a fixed blade design that was very similar to a design that was already out there, and he was completely unaware of this design. I'll link his video in the description too, so you could go and get further details on that. I think he did a great job of handling that whole situation, basically reaching out to the maker and being like, hey man, we had a very similar idea. It happens. It happens. But even though those two designs were very, very similar, they could be told apart if you looked closely.
Hell, not just blade shapes and designs, names, which is the most ludicrous thing. I brought that up. I thought I had one in there. I thought I brought that up not long ago. Heretic Knives got all worked up at Cold Steel over the Colossus.
The next thing Scab brings up is knife names and companies trying to be like, oh, we already have a knife named that. You got to change the name. He brought up the whole Heretic Colossus, Cold Steel Colossus thing. Yeah, I think that's stupid. I think that's stupid. If it's a name that's pulled from like the common vocabulary, yeah, what? I completely agree on this point. Copying names, I don't really think is a thing. Now, if I design a knife and I name it the Gideon, last name redacted, I think a lot of you already know my last name, but I like to pretend like you don't, so I'm not going to say it on my channel. Gideon, last name redacted. If I name a knife after myself, and then Civivi releases a knife named the Gideon, last name redacted, without consulting me, I'll be like, what? Although, once again, it's not impossible for someone to have the same name as me. So, again, I guess that one kind of doesn't really matter that much. But, I mean, let's take a famous figure. Let's not take me, right? Let's say Cold Steel releases a knife called the Lynn Thompson. And then Civivi decides to release a knife called the Lynn Thompson. That's like a little, tiny, itty-bitty slip joint. I don't know. Maybe that'd be different. Even then, though, I don't know. I don't know. I think we should actually name more knives after celebrities, and not just like knife people celebrities. We got a lot of knives, named after people like Ken Onion, Bob Dozier, and things like that. But I think we need to. The first company who designs the Kim K knife, I will buy it. Let's get a Bob Ross knife. The Ryan Gosling. I could see lawsuits ensuing because of that, but it'd be funny.
Every knife I review, without fail, every one, whether it's on a short, whether it's on the video, somebody will say, well, it looks like this, or yes. I don't design knives. I'll never design knives for a couple of reasons. The first reason is what we're talking about right here. Every knife shape, every handle shape, everything's been done. All I would be doing, the only thing I would be doing is putting my spin on it.
All right, so it's here that I think I want to kind of address my main thesis in this video and my main complaint. This idea of everything has already been done. Knives have been around for a very, very long time. Homo sapiens did not invent knives. Homo neanderthalensis did not invent knives. Homo heidelbergensis did not invent knives. Homo erectus did not invent knives. Homo habilis did not invent knives. The oldest edged tools that we have evidence of come from the Lomweki site, which were Australopithecines, right? These are very, very early hominids. About 3 million years ago. Knives have been around for a very, very long time. In that time, yeah, we have figured out what works. We have figured out, yeah, this is generally going to be a knife that works for everybody. But never say never, right? I do not like this idea that everything has already been done. Everything has already been made. There is no more innovation possible. And again, this is something that I touched on in my clones and counterfeits video. There are many, many knives that are reminiscent of other knives. This knife right here, oh, it's a bug out. Oh, it looks just like a bug out. Well, it's got a lot of differences that separate it from a bug out. I could tell this and a bug out apart very, very easily. Now, when someone makes a knife where they basically just trace out the bug out and then make it, I can tell you right then and there, oh, that person directly copied the bug out. There's not enough changes. They didn't change enough to differentiate it in any way. Now, again, people have found out that drop point blades are very, very useful. But over the years, we have seen drop point blades take a great many shapes and forms. We have seen people do different things with them. There is enough variation to be able to tell several knives apart. Do a lot of knives look similar? Yeah, absolutely. Aurora Knife and Tool released the Hive Mind, where they took, outlines of hundreds of knives and overlaid them on top of each other, or not outlines, but silhouettes of hundreds of knives and laid them on top of each other. And then they took the darkest portion. They took basically the average of all these designs, and they made that into their design. But that's the average of the designs. Okay, you look at the image that they used, and there are outliers. There's faint lines out and about. There are ways to differentiate and make a knife your design, even with something as simple as a drop point fixed blade, right? It's not just color. It's not just materials. How is it swedged? How high is your grind? What do your handle ergos look like? This is very, very common. There's a lot of knives like this, but maybe you just have one big well up front and then you bring it back. Maybe you pistol grip it. Maybe you put a lanyard hole here. Maybe you put it up here, whatever, right? There are lots of small variation. And these small variations might not seem like much, but they are important. Small variations are what separates a great maker from a copycat. If you're someone who understands knife design, if you're someone who has an intimate knowledge of how knives should perform, of how they work with the human ergonomics, you can make very small adjustments and tweaks to a seemingly innocuous and ordinary design to make it even better. And that's why it's so obvious when someone is doing a clone or a counterfeit knife. It's because they're just copying someone else's homework without knowing how that knife should function. I talked about my clones and counterfeit video. I have a knife that is a knockoff of a Matt Gentry. I didn't realize it at the time, found out later, and it's very easy for me to look at the two knives and be like, oh yeah, they just copied Matt Gentry's homework. The knife is an okay knife. Is it as good as the Gentry? I don't know. I haven't handled a Gentry, but I would guarantee it's not, because Matt Gentry knows how knives are supposed to function. He understands the theory behind knife design. The people that stole his design and copied it don't. They saw something that looked good, but they were too lazy, too uncreative to think of their own design, so they just copied what he did. If you're a teacher grading a test, let's say it's a math test, you're grading this math test, and you find that two students have the same answer for a question, that's not a big deal, right? It's math. 2 plus 2 is always going to be 4. But then you start looking at how they arrived at that answer, and you start noticing something a little bit different, something a little bit weird. One thing that you could do is maybe they didn't show their work and they just wrote the answer down. How they get that answer? You have no idea. You call the student in, you say, hey, how did you come up with this answer? How did you solve this polynomial? And if they can't explain it, oh, you didn't solve it. Maybe you had ChatGPT do it for you. Maybe you just looked over at someone else's work and you saw they wrote down x equals 42, and so you scribbled that down. They got the right answer, but they don't know how they did it. They don't understand it because they're dumb. The other thing is you look at this at these two people's work, and you notice that one person's work very closely mimics the other person's. That they have even the same, they've written out the way that they factored the polynomial. Everything that they've done is written very, very similarly. That's suspicious. Okay, they got the right answer, and they're both using like the same steps, but people are not just copycat clones. So you call them both in, you say, okay, student 1, I would like you to go to the board and solve this problem. And they write it out. You say, okay. Student 2, I'd like you to go to the board and solve this problem. Separately, of course. You're doing this in separate meetings. And they can't do it. Well, then you know that student 2 copied student 1. They looked at what they were doing and wrote down every single step, piece by piece. And so what you have is 2 students with the right answer, 2 students whose work looks identical, but only one of them who actually knew what they were doing. One of them understood theory. The other one only understood how to steal, cheat, and mimic. And so even if 2 knife designs look identical, you can figure out if it was something where it's like, oh, they just came up with the same idea, because if they both understand how to design knives, it's like, okay, they had a similar idea. And every time that happens, I guarantee there are enough minute details to be able to tell the 2 knives apart, under careful scrutiny. They might be very similar at a glance, but under careful scrutiny, there are probably multiple small differences that, separate them. And we'll come back to small differences. But if it's someone that just copied someone else's work, you'll notice that knife, it might look the same, but it is not as good of a knife because the people who made it didn't understand it. And that is one of the big problems that I have with counterfeit and clone knives. And that's something that I touched on in that other video, and we're going to, stop beating that dead horse right here. The better horse that I'd like to beat, the other issue that I want to address is do not underestimate human ingenuity. Do not underestimate human creativity. Do not underestimate how smart we are. We have amazing brains up here in our noggins. Amazing. These are the world's most complex supercomputers, right? And I think especially in today's day and age, human creativity is under attack. Human creativity is being devalued. It's being shit on, right? By things like AI, which we'll talk about. But let's think about something. There are only so many ways to make a knife, right? Okay, I accept that. There's only so many notes that instruments can play. There's only so many ways you can arrange those notes in an order to form a song. Have you ever been listening to a song and been like, oh, that part right there kind of reminds me of this other song? It happens all the time, right? Sometimes there is plagiarism going on, but sometimes it's just because, that was similar, right? These 2 artists had a similar beat going on. Country music, I brought this up in the other video. Country music, a lot of different songs from a lot of different artists use the same chords over and over again, right? But does that mean that every single song sounds exactly the same? No. There's a lot of derivative slop out there, particularly with country music, right? Gosh, don't get me started on like dude bro country and ugh. But you've also got people out here who are creating songs that are very unique, songs that are very much their own, right? Coulter Wall, who's not really a country artist, he's more Western artist, but Tyler Childers or Cody Jinks or people like this. Just because there's only so many notes, there's only so many ways to arrange them to make a sound, does that mean that we should just say, well, every song's already been made? Like there's no point in making new music, right? Every song's already been made. That's all we can do, right? No. Just because there's only so many notes that any instrument can play, and there's only so many ways to arrange those notes, and there's only so many ways to, arrange different instrumental compositions, doesn't mean that making music is pointless anymore. It doesn't mean that original songs don't exist. Music has been around for thousands of years. Has every song already been made? No. No, absolutely not. There are songs that are similar, but there's small variations that allow you to tell them apart, right? This kind of brings us to AI. I was talking to someone the other day, and they're like, "Oh, listen to this song." And I was like, "Man, that sounds like AI." And they're like, "Oh yeah, it is." I was like, "Oh." I said, "Yeah, I prefer AI music. I just like AI music." Tell me you have a room temperature IQ without telling me you have a room temperature IQ. Now, AI can be fun or whatever, but I find it to be cheap. I find it to be soulless. It's not good. It's not good. And I think a lot of people have just kind of given up on human creativity. Oh, you know, I can just generate an image. Oh, I can just generate a song. Oh, I can just do this, that, and the other. Those images, those songs that you're generating are actually uncreative because they're not coming from someone's own thoughts. Even if someone is synthesizing, someone's like, oh, I really like this particular element of knife design. Oh, I really like this particular sound in my music. They're taking inspiration and creating something new. And we'll talk about that here in a second. AI is just, AI slop just takes from things that other people have done, takes other people's hard work and spits out an inferior copy. It's the most disgusting form of mimicry. They say imitation is flattery. Not when it's AI. When it's AI, it's just putrid slop. Imagine, if you will, someone comes up to you, your boss comes up to you at your job and says, hey, by the way, you're fired. You're done. Get out of here, pack your stuff and leave. And you're like, whoa, what happened? Your boss says, well, we hired someone who will work your position for a fraction of the cost. And you're like, oh my gosh, well, does he have the experience and knowledge that I have? Does he have what I bring to the table? I'm like, well, we've actually been filming you for the last, couple of years. And this guy has sat down and watched all the recordings that we have of you performing your job. And he just copies it and he's got it down, good enough. Like, I wouldn't say he's as good as you, but he gets the job done. And again, he's way cheaper. So, we've trained this guy on your work so that we can boot you out. They'd be horrible. It'd be horrible, right? Your company just wants to make a fast buck. Your experience, your skill, bam, it's out of here. And that guy's going to do a subpar job. But it's cheap. It's cheap. It's good enough. AI music is good enough for some people, but it's never going to beat human ingenuity. Now let's talk about small details. What do small details matter? What do small details matter? Something like where you put the lanyard hole, what kind of swedging you add to the blade, And real quick, I will say I do think that there is more potential for like absolutely groundbreaking, like never before seen knife designs when it comes to folders as opposed to fixed blades. But this does still apply to fixed blades. What do small details matter? Well, they matter a lot. They matter a whole bunch. Let's talk paleontology for a little bit, okay? Recently, a new species of Tyrannosaurus was announced from my home state of New Mexico. And by recently, I mean 2024. And this jawbone had been found in the Cray Formation around Truth or Consequences back in the 80s. And it had been sitting on display in the Natural History Museum in Albuquerque for years. And when it was found, it was a massive theropod jawbone, had these big, huge teeth in it. It was from the Cretaceous period. And the scientists who found it were like, well, obviously this is T-Rex. Didn't think anything of it. There you go. Well, years later, some questions came up. So people looking at the mandible in the museum were like, there's some features here that may not be T-Rex. The curvature isn't quite as pronounced on the bone. There's little tiny autapomorphies. These are features that are unique to a species. Little tiny details, super tiny details that might differentiate this from Tyrannosaurus rex. Okay. Those are cool, but maybe those little tiny details are up to individual variation, blah, 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 like whatever. Eventually, I believe that the new species is valid. A lot of people do. A lot of that work comes down to geochronology. By dating the rock units that the jawbone was found in, it was found to have lived several million years before T-Rex. So it was given a new name, Tyrannosaurus macronensis, named after the McRae Formation where it was found. But I tell that story because it illustrates the importance of small details. It is the small details that separate species, right? Small details. Small details are important. You can't just overlook them. If you look at something from far away and you're like, yeah, I understand everything I need to know about that thing from a distance, you're doing yourself a disservice. Get up close to it. Look at the small details. And this comes back to what I was saying about people who might have similar ideas. Maybe they have an idea that is very, very similar, but compare the two products. Compare what they've come up with. If these two people are very, very good at what they do, there are going to be very slight variations. There's going to be individual flair and flavor coming from both creators. And that matters. It really freaking matters. And there's a comment under this video that I find to be sad, to be completely honest. This guy is saying, there is nothing that us simple-minded people could come up with that hasn't been done before. You're selling yourself short, man. You're selling yourself short. And yeah, not everyone is going to be the world's greatest knife designer, right? It's getting dark in here. Video quality is about to go. But that's okay. This is how we roll on this channel. You're selling yourself short. Now, yeah, not everyone is a knife designer. Not everyone's a knife designer. It takes skill. It does. It takes skill. And yeah, if you sit down as someone who is not a knife designer and you start like drawing out a knife and you're like, oh, shoot. Silly me. I just drew a Shirogorov neon or whatever. Ah, man. Okay. Right? Like that. Okay. But some people are knife designers. And some people understand how to make their knife and how to differentiate it from other designs. And once again, I'll refer you to Jay Fisher's website. Go look at his knife designs. He has a whole section on designing knives. He's got a picture of him there drawing out his designs. It's a skill. It's a skill. I like playing basketball. I suck. I suck. Especially compared to, a pro. It's just not my ballpark, and some things just aren't your ballpark. Yeah, maybe not everyone is a knife designer. Maybe not everyone can design a knife that's unique and special, but don't sell yourself short. Don't sell, simple-minded people short, right? We're not simple-minded, any of us. We're pretty freaking awesome as a species. We're really, really cool. Don't sell yourself short, all right? We may not all be knife designers, but we're all pretty cool.
When guys go to design, they've been influenced, unless they've sat in a room in the dark their entire life and just happened to be some kind of savant knife designer. They've seen other knives. That doesn't mean they've stolen. Oh, man, I like that knife. Let me incorporate a little bit of this. Let me use a little bit of that. I worked with this knife, man. It worked good. Let me put a little of that in.
And yes, Scab hit it out of the park with this one. Everyone has been influenced. We have all seen knives, and as a knife designer, you have used countless knives. You've seen thousands and thousands of knives. You have been influenced. You are building on what came before, but that doesn't mean that you're just retreading the same old ground. It doesn't mean that you're just doing something that's already been done, right? We're going to talk science again. I'm a scientist, guys. Like, come on. I talk science. Physics. Newton's laws. Newtonian physics, very, very useful. Groundbreaking when Newton started coming up with these theories and laws. Awesome, awesome stuff. We still use Newtonian physics. It's still very, very useful. I had to do 2 years of physics for my education. And we started at the basics with Newtonian physics. They're very, very useful. It's important. I'm going to take my hat off just so you guys can see my face a little bit better. Got hat hair, but that's okay. Whatever. Surprise, I have hair under my hat. Very useful. Newtonian physics, very useful. Very important for people to understand. Sets a foundation. But hundreds of years after Newton, we know a lot more now. We know a lot more about the universe, and we have discovered that, Newtonian physics don't actually apply in every situation. When you get to the quantum scale, Newtonian physics break down. So we came up with, quantum physics. We've come up with new ways of synthesizing what we know, new ways of experimenting. Doesn't mean that Newton was wrong. No, he was right, and we have built on his work. We took Newton's ideas and we built on them. And that's what science is all about. It's about building on what came before. But that doesn't mean that we're just doing the same thing over and over again. That would not be progress. That would be stagnation. And again, this is something I brought up in my video about clones. Because people were saying, everybody copies everyone. That's how we progress. That's how technology evolves. No, technology does not evolve just by copying what someone else did. Technology evolves by taking good ideas and building on them, improving them, putting your own spin on it. Even if it's something as simple as, I really like the handle ergos of this particular knife. I like the blade shape of this knife. I'm going to try and merge them together and blah, 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 blah. That is progression. If we let's say that this was the first knife ever made, ever. And no one decided to make any other knife. We just kept making that knife over and over and over again for centuries. That's not progression. That's stagnation. Nothing gets better by just copying. And so the fact that we are seeing so much, I would say, innovation in the knife world right now points to the fact that we have a very healthy economy of brand new ideas. Think about someone like Brian Winters. He is doing things with knives that no one else has ever done before. But his products are still recognizable as knives. It is going to... I don't even know if I have enough lights in here to do what I'm trying to do. Fuck! Ghost stories with Gideon. This could be a very bad idea, guys. That's doable. His products are still very recognizable as pocket knives and such. Again, there's archetypes, but there is innovation. There are people doing different things, right? And everyone has been influenced. Everyone has taken inspiration from what came before, but we build on it. We improve it. Now, I think a lot of people nowadays, when they talk about innovation and knives, a lot of people automatically think about, new steel compositions, new materials, and blah, 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 blah. But there is still a lot of innovation going on when it comes to knife design, right? Even if it's, got a Hinder Jurassic in my pocket right now. This is a knifey looking knife. Hinder's got his tri-way pivot system going on. That's a little bit of innovation. Does that really apply to the knife design? Yeah, I think in some way it does. Also, Hinder's knives are very recognizable as Hinderers. All his different designs, you look at it and you're like, oh, Hinderer did that. Mark of a true craftsman, right? When you're able to recognize his work just by seeing it. And the point is, being influenced by previous inventions, previous designs, is not the same as just making the same thing over and over again. Being influenced by does not equal doing something that's already been done. You can take something that someone did in the past and build upon it.
So what do I think? What do I think? And this knife, well, it looks just like the Tops Tahoma. It doesn't. It's similar. I could hold them up. It's similar. The colors are the same, right? The front of the knife's similar. That's where it ends. I love the Tops Tahoma. And that's kind of my point too, guys. When guys go to design, they've been influenced. Unless they've sat in a room in the dark their entire life and just happened to be some kind of savant knife designer, they've seen other knives. That doesn't mean they've stolen. Oh man, I like that knife. Let me incorporate a little bit of this. Let me use a little bit of that. I worked with this knife, man. It worked good. Let me put a little of that in.
And even right here, Scab was talking about how, oh, this knife looks kind of like a Tops knife or whatever, but they're not, and he points out how he can tell the difference between the two. Yeah. Maybe they're both based on Bowie knives, but they're doing their own thing. I love Bowie knives. Bowie knives have been around for a while. And this is, again, Bowie knife is it's an archetype. It's a pattern. It's something that people have known about for a while, but there's still improvement. There's still ways to make variations on the pattern. Right now, let's see if I can actually grab it. I've got this Night Hunter right now. This is, I would say this is a Bowie knife variant. If I took this back, to the 1830s and handed it to Resin Bowie, who, as Scab points out, may not have even invented the Bowie knife, would he recognize it as a Bowie? I think he would, but he'd also be like, what on earth is this? Like, oh my gosh, I have never seen anything like this before. It's because we have built on maybe his idea over the centuries, and we're still innovating on it.
What do I think makes a knife design the designers? Group A is your blade shapes, right here. Group B is your handle shapes. As a knife designer, it is your job and your responsibility to put the shapes together that work. I think there is a mathematical formula. I think what separates true designers and people with just good ideas are the guys who can figure out the weight, the balance. Because really, if you take a knife, I improved it. You made it thicker and longer. Okay, if that improved the balance, the functionality of it, great. If you improve a knife's performance, if you are the one behind the actual mathematical equation that makes that knife function properly, you're the designer.
And I gotta say, Scab's point here, I think, undermines his entire video. Because he makes a concession that, there is such a thing as a knife designer, right? There's, if you're someone who makes it mathematically better, you're the designer. And the problem I have with that is that mathematics don't translate that well to knife use. That might be shocking to hear a science guy like me say, but if you take a knife design, like there's no better for everyone, right? If you take this knife, or let's say you take a bushcraft knife and you redesign it to be a hunting knife. Like you take that, kind of the basic profile, but you get rid of the Scandi grind. You give it a hollow grind, maybe you thin out the blade stock, you swap out the handle materials, you maybe give it a gut hook at the end. I'm not a big fan of gut hooks on my hunting knives, but let's say you do all that. Have you mathematically made the knife better? Well, you've made it a worse bushcrafting knife, but maybe you've made it a better hunting knife. And in the process of doing that, you created a new knife. Not a knife for the bushcraft people, but you created a knife for the hunting people. Does that make you a knife designer now? Yeah, I think it does. I love this knife. I would say that the White River Ursus Cub is damn near a perfect EDC fixed blade. But you know what? There's probably someone out there who's like, nah, it's just not for me. And if, I came around, I was like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to drill a bunch of holes out of the blade, and we're going to add a karambit ring, blah, 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 blah. I think that'd make it a worse knife. But maybe for someone out there, it'd make it a better knife. Knife usage and application is so vast and honestly so subjective that there is no saying, oh, you mathematically made this knife better. Maybe you made it better for someone and worse for someone else, right? And that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make, is there are countless ways to innovate and change a knife. Even if you're not like reinventing the wheel, even if you're not, designing lightsabers, right? There are still countless ways to innovate in knife design. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is like, the whole legal side of it. And this is a much crazier type of thing. Yeah, if you and another maker, let's say, you guys are small makers, come up with knives that look very, very similar. Let's say that me and someone else design a knife that looks basically exactly like this, and someone gets their feelings hurt. It's like, oh, well, you copied me. And it's like, I had no idea you were making this. I just came up with this. Yeah, I think like getting all pee-pee-hearted about stuff like that is stupid. I don't think you could prove, foul play in that case. Now, if it's a Chinese company that popped up on Amazon 2 weeks ago and all of a sudden they've got a knife that looks very similar to yours, maybe there's a little bit of shenanigans going on there. But, the whole legal side of things is a little bit weird. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to comment on lawyer stuff. But the thing I will say is people do have similar designs. It is very possible to point out that people were not copying each other by looking at small details. And if someone is copying someone else and being lazy, it probably means they're cutting other corners. And that knife is probably inferior. So, again, if you're taking a math test, it's very possible to come up with the same answer as someone else. But it's also easy to tell when someone knows what they're doing and when someone is just copying because they're a hack. It's easy to tell, okay? 117 billion people have lived on this planet. But none of them were you until now. You're the first one of you. There might have been 1 million people over the past 300,000 years that looked exactly like me, or that looked exactly like Scab, or that looked exactly like any one of you watching this video. But they weren't you. They did not live your life. They did not have your unique set of experiences. They did not think exactly like you. You are unique. You are special. We all are. Human ingenuity and creativity is boundless. We have not done everything there is to do. There is still tons and tons of ideas to be had and places to be explored. Really, we have only scratched the surface. We're really smart. We're really creative. And we build on what came before. That's what separates us from the other animals. Why do we take over the planet? It's not just because we were smart. It's because we have generational knowledge. It's because we pass our knowledge down. We don't just copy what came before. We build on what came before. We innovate. And it allows us to be the marvels of nature that we are. I'm not Scab. He is. And I love you, Scab. Again, this video, no hate, but it's something that I do think I want to talk about, something that I'm very passionate about. I think there's been a lot of devaluing of human creativity and uniqueness recently, and I'm not saying that that's what Scab was doing in his video, but it's something that I want to get out and get ahead of, right? So just something I'm passionate about. Thank you guys for watching. This has been a weird video. I've talked for too long. Yes, I took Scab's 9-minute video and I probably made I don't know how long this is going to be, 40-minute reaction to it. But, you know, that's how we roll here at Gideon Stuff. Anyways, big shout out to my channel members at the cowboy level. I appreciate everything they do for the channel. If you want to become a member and support me directly, there is a link down below where you can do that. Check out Scab's channel, of course. As for the rest of you hooligans, if you enjoyed the video, leave it a like, comment below, and subscribe. I've been Gideon, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.